Okay, it looks as though we have everybody here from OAG, Councilmember Allen's office, USAO, and PDS. So I think we can go ahead and get started. I would just like to remind the members of the community that public comment, it will be available at the end should you have a comment.
Great. So thank you, Alana, and thanks for everybody for being here today. I'm Patrick Canavan. I'm the mental health member of the board, and I've been coordinating until we get to the point of electing a chairperson for the board. I wanted to start off our agenda. It starts with welcoming call to order. So consider yourself welcome. I would like to go around and just ask for members of the board to introduce yourself and what part of the world you're representing here as a board member. So maybe the mayoral appointees could start.
Well, I'll start. I'm Sam Baker. Everybody can hear me okay.
Reverend Whitaker, we had a hard time hearing you. I don't know if you go on mute. That probably will help.
Oh, okay, hold on.
Yeah, I hear you.
Oh, okay, I'm I'm Sam Whitaker, board member of the Clemency Board of Residents.
Thank you, Reverend.
Hello, this is Felisa Carter. I am a board member, and I am on the board and with the knowledge of returning citizen issues.
And I am Andy Foyce. I am the board member appointed by the mayor with knowledge of the criminal justice system, an attorney with knowledge of the criminal justice system, which I've been involved in the district for most of my career.
Okay, thank you. If we could represent Councilmember Allen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sonia Weil, and I work for Councilmember Allen, and he will be joining the call very shortly.
Thank you. Okay, how about the lawyer members from the various legal agencies?
I couldn't quite hear you, but I'm Ilana Suttenberg. I'm the Special Counsel for Legislative Affairs at the U.S. Attorney's Office.
I am Emily Gunston. I'm representing the Office of the Attorney General.
Okay, I think PDS is on as well.
Hi, my name is Katya Semyonova. I'm Special Counsel to the Director for Policy and Legislation, and I'm representing the Public Defender Service for the District of Columbia. Hello, everyone.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. I apologize.
Katya Semyonova.
Okay, any other members here? And I know that we have OGC is represented, I think, Ray, who's helped us with the administrative aspect. Are there any other board members on the line? Okay. So everybody could go on if you're not, that would be great. Okay. Old business. The only item under old business is the adoption of the bylaws. And I know that I saw yesterday that Ms. Gunston had done significant review of that. Appreciate that very much. And I know that Alana also did a review today. Alana, could you present them, put them up and present them? And what I'd like to do is,
Can you see it?
Yes, we can. If we could just, Alana, it might be best if you just kind of run us through where the changes are most recently. I see you have the track changes version up.
And I'm sorry, Alana, before you do that, this is Emily. I just wanted to say my intention in making these edits was to memorialize the decision-making of the group last time. I might have made some errors in that. It was not my intention to sort of, replace my judgment of others. If I've gotten something wrong, please feel free to jump in and let me know I got it wrong. I was just trying to be helpful.
No, and we took it in the spirit of helpfulness. Thank you.
Well, actually, Emily, did you want to go over the changes that you made? Because there are some that are kind of old, and I'm not sure of everything that
Sure, I can try to do that. Let me see. I'm going to pull my version up on my screen because I might be able to see it a little bit better then. Okay, I wonder, does it make sense, Alana, for me to share my screen instead? Or I guess we can just walk through it this way. This should probably work fine. Okay.
If you want to share your screen, that's fine. I'll stop sharing right now.
Okay, I'll try to share mine. Bear with me. Nope.
Oh, no, it's working.
Okay, can you see that? Are you looking at the Clemency Board bylaws right now?
Yes.
Not my notes of other meetings. Okay. On the quorum, I don't think I made any changes here at all. So this should reflect, Alana, unless you made additional changes. All I did here was, since we decided on a quorum here, and I think we decided the quorum was the same for each purpose, I deleted it elsewhere that quorum showed up. So we should look at this and make sure that we believe that this definition of quorum is satisfactory to everybody for all purposes. So we have a quorum shall be a simple majority of the statutorily required and invited members.
Yeah, that looks good to me. That reflects what we spoke of.
Okay.
It seems like, this is Felisa. It seems like that's what we talked about.
Okay. I didn't make any changes here. Looks like somebody made some grammatical changes. Some guest user made some grammatical changes here. This is also old. I think we decided, I didn't make this change. I think we decided on before that we would provide notice to the mayor. This is in number 9. I changed the language here because what it said before was that we would publish the applications that we granted and denied. And that just seemed like the wrong terminology, since we don't actually grant or deny applications. We either make recommendations to the president or we don't. So it seemed to me that the relevant information for the public is how many complete applications we received, and of those, how many we recommended to the president. So that's what I tried to capture here. Feel free to tell me that I either didn't capture that correctly or that that's not your understanding.
Well, it seems as though when you say complete applications, that you mean that the ones that you sent.
So what I meant by that, and we can discuss this, at some point we need to determine what is required for an application, right? And so it seemed to me possible that what could happen is people could submit applications that were incomplete, and that the fact that we didn't forward those on to the president is not actually a denial, but rather the application for some reason was incomplete. And so it seems like what people want to know really is how many we considered and didn't forward and how many we did. We could also put in here something about an
Regular service.
application having
We will
been
start
incomplete.
person sort of kind of in October, limited. But check in.
Sam, you're not on mute. Can you mute your mic, please?
Let me know how to spread.
But just start next week. Okay.
Hey,
Sam?
Ricker, you might need to mute. I see you on the system twice. You might need to mute both devices. All right, seems like we're okay again. What's that? I was. You seem to be on the meeting in two different devices. You have to mute both of them. We could hear some conversation.
Okay.
Okay, let's jump back in. Item 9. So the question here is about complete applications.
Yeah. I could take out the word complete. I was just trying to distinguish between applications that we didn't really consider because the person didn't submit a complete application, and those that we did.
Okay, that makes sense. Now that I see it again, but I would like to hear from Sonia as to if that captures what council wants in their report.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. And I'll note that Councilmember Allen just joined the call as well. But yeah, I agree with the taking out of the grants and denies and having the number of applications that we forward to the president being reported.
Okay, on number 10, undertake other duties as assigned by the mayor or mayor's general counsel. Kate had asked what examples of this, and I didn't have any. Do folks think we should add this back in and include examples, or should we just delete it as I've done here? Or leave it as it was?
Well, I don't have a vote here, but I would prefer that it stay in.
Okay.
Other duties would be like setting up or assisting setting up a committee or assisting the chair in some other capacity or just furthering the mission of the Clemency Board.
Yeah, I agree with Alana. I'm for leaving it in. It's kind of standard boilerplate language in a lot of places, and it does no harm.
Okay. All right. I just put that back in. Okay, membership. I think
it could be, sorry, I was struggling with the mute button. It could be sort of tailored to the objectives of the board. It's just very free floating the way that it's currently phrased.
Yeah, I think if we add like at the end, undertake other duties that further the mission of the Clemency Board or the purpose of the Clemency Board as assigned by the mayor's general counsel, I think that might help. Instead of people thinking like, okay, well now the mayor wants you to go work at Board of Elections or something like that. It keeps it limited just to the Clemency Board. Is that okay?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, Katya and Alana, I think that's a good addition. Thank you.
Okay, I made that change.
And Emily, sorry, yep. Before we move on, in 8B, could we add the U.S. Attorney's Office to the list of people who get notified about recommendations?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody okay with that? Okay, members. Okay. Membership, I didn't make any changes here. I think these are changes that Alana had made just for clarity that I think we discussed before. I changed the language here just to match the statute. I'm sorry, the board shall select the chairperson from among the members. I think that's the language from the statute, so I just changed it to match that. Okay, meetings. Here is one place where I wanted to make sure that I understood our discussion last time. I think what we decided is that the hearings would take place at the meetings or could take place at the meetings and that the hearings would be confidential. But I want to make that, so that's what this reflects right now, that the meetings will be open except while we're holding a hearing on an application or considering the application. I then took off this last bullet, discussing matters that would allow for the identity of any person who's a subject of the discussion, other than those who consented. I just found it confusing. I wasn't sure what it was referring to. It seems to me that the only confidential matters we would be considering is the clemency application itself, and that anytime we were having discussions about a person whose name should be kept confidential, that would be in the context of consideration of a clemency application.
Any questions or comments on that?
This is Felisa. The changes made sense to me. It made it clearer to me.
Alana, what did this refer to? Do you recall?
It's just referring to those who would be speaking during a clemency clemency hearing. So if there was a victim that wanted to speak before the board, that their information would be confidential too, if they wanted it to be confidential. But I think it was mostly put there just so that during a meeting, an open meeting, that their names aren't discussed prior to closing the meeting. But if it is, it would be part of the closed portion. It would have to be closed electronically since we're all online. But if that was mentioned, it would have to be off the record.
Okay.
So that's a good point. Should we add it back in just in case, even though right outside of the context of discussing a recommendation, we might be discussing testimony or something like that? I'm having a hard time thinking how that could happen, but certainly I can imagine that theoretically it would. If it does, it's still under the Open Meetings Act. It would be it would be inclusive of what could be closed and closed to the public. It could stay in the bylaws as maybe a reminder not to do that during the open meeting, but it does not matter. Okay. And is it correct that we decided that the hearings would happen at the meetings and that the hearings themselves would be confidential? It was that the hearings can happen at the meetings, but they can also happen separately. So you can have a meeting with no hearing, and you can have a hearing with no meeting. Okay. Or you can have them both having a hearing right after a meeting. Okay.
So if we have a meeting, would the hearing incorporated with the meeting, or would the meeting like break and have a separate hearing because everybody in the meeting might not be able to come to the hearing?
So let me go down to where we did the order of meetings. That might be the best place to have that discussion. Okay, and I
I did change that. So if you're having a meeting and then you're going to have a hearing, and let's say there are public members, not public members, members of the public on the meeting, then we would have to close it and wait for those persons to leave, or we can start a new one right after. But there would have to be some type of break in order to close it and then to start the hearing. So the changes that I made to the order of the meetings, I separated them as what could happen in a meeting and what could happen in a hearing, just in case we have the situation where the meeting is separate, is on a different day than the hearing. Because we aren't required to have a meeting every single time we have a hearing and vice versa. So I wanted to allow the most flexibility in organizing a meeting or hearing.
So just to make sure I understand, so what we're looking at right now is the order of business for each regular meeting. So there'll be the call to order, the announcement of the quorum, the approval of the minutes. Then old business and new business and public comment. And then adjourn. And then this next part that you've added in, Alana, is this the hearing?
Yes, so it says the order of business for each hearing shall follow the following order of business. Call to order, quorum if not immediately conducted after a hearing, consideration of recommendations and adjournment.
So but the consideration of recommendations, is that part of the hearing? It seems to me that there might be recommendations from a previous hearing, or that we might do, right, the recommendations may not be, consideration of recommendations wouldn't necessarily be related to the hearing we just heard. I imagine what might want to happen is we hold a hearing, then we all go back and maybe look at the materials based on the hearing. I don't know, I'm just wondering. And then we might consider a recommendation for a prior hearing. So I'm just wondering if we put consideration of recommendations separate from the hearing.
Well, I guess it should more appropriately say consideration of the application. So you have the hearing and you look at that part and say, okay, we're listening to the applicant, or the applicant's attorney, then we're listening to anybody who wants to speak about it, who has personal knowledge, and then we could have consideration or discussion after that, or it could be a discussion of a different hearing. But that can be changed. I don't know how to, you could write or change that.
Does anybody else have thoughts? I'm just wondering, I'm just trying to picture this. I can imagine what we might do is have more than one hearing scheduled for a particular time. And then I can imagine there would be some discussion immediately following it, but that we may not at that moment determine a recommendation. So I wonder, let's see. So you're just thinking, Alana, that we do this for each hearing, even if we're doing more than one a day, or maybe nobody thinks we'll be doing more than one a day, in which case this works.
Hi, it's Andy. I think we might do one a day. I don't think more than one a day. I don't think we should rule that out. But this item 3, however phrased, is the guts of what's going to happen at hearings. So we can't eliminate it. We could say consideration of application or something with an S in parentheses, so that it's one or more. But some version of this has to stay there.
Agreed. Yep. I'm just thinking that if we're doing more than one hearing, I'm not sure that we need to do, or maybe we do, a call to order and announcement of a quorum at the beginning of each hearing. If we're doing more than one, maybe we do. Okay, call to order, announce consideration of recommendations. Okay, I think this works then, unless anybody else has thoughts.
Well, what about changing?
This is Felisa. I'm looking at the consideration and recommendations. I think maybe the language of a consideration of application is better. And right now we're not going to figure out kind of how, unless we're getting into detail about how the procedure is going to be. I don't know if that's something we discuss later on. It doesn't necessarily have to be discussed in the bylaws right now. But we meet later or discuss in detail how the procedure, how to do this, how to conduct the hearings procedurally. Yeah, that doesn't need to be necessarily detailed in the bylaws, but maybe that's something to be scheduled later. I don't know, Patrick, what do you think? Is that something we discuss now, or we hold that off for later when we get into detail about how we want to proceed with the hearings?
My sense has always been that we're going to do these bylaws, and in the bylaws, we're going to refer that we were going to establish, I don't know what it's called, regulations or procedures secondary to that. But the bylaws this is just enacting us as a board, and that the procedures can change over time, with some agreement of the group. But that's actually the nuts and bolts of how we would, get the applications, review the applications, and make determinations on the applications. I think that's a later discussion.
So later on, we can discuss how we go by kind of detail by detail. But right now, we just kind of have a general outline of what the meetings and the hearings will look like. Kind of outline them in the bylaws. They don't have to be necessarily detailed exactly because regs are for later. Regulations are for later.
Correct.
A later discussion.
Anybody? What are others' position on that?
I agree with you, Patrick.
Okay.
Okay, so now I'm back up at meetings. So we've discussed this portion. The next thing, what I tried to do was separate out meetings and hearings. At that time, I had been thinking hearings happen at the meetings, but I think Alana's right that we might have some hearings that happen separate from meetings. And so we just might need to say this twice, which maybe Alana put that back in somewhere. But so since this is about meetings, I took it out of hearings and moved it here. Agendas for all meetings of the board shall be prepared by the chairperson in consultation with EOM's OJC, taking into consideration the record. So I didn't change this language. I just moved it to make clear that this was about meetings. We might just need to repeat it in a separate section about hearings.
This is Felisa. Seemed to make sense to me, and maybe repeating this item and as it's outlined for hearings.
Okay. Yep. Help me remember when we get to hearings that we may need to put that back in. And then same with the agenda. I put the agenda for the meetings out here. Oh, great. Okay. Similarly, I just moved this from hearings. Alana, you must have changed it here, I imagine, to match the legislative language.
I changed it to 14 days because that's how much time we have to submit it to the register for notice 14 days in advance. So it'd be kind of unfair to submit it to the register and then share it with the other members 5 days in advance.
Got it. Perfect. Okay. This, I didn't make any changes. I think we had deleted this last time about the how short the meetings would be. Okay, hearings. I'm sorry if you can hear virtual school going on in the background.
It's a joy.
Okay, hearings. Okay, it looks like Alana added this language here. That's super helpful. Sort of defining what a hearing is. Is everybody comfortable with this language? A hearing is a board session. Petitions are reviewed.
This is Felisa. It helps with clarity.
Agreed. Okay. Hearings can be held during the regular meetings, but will not be open to the public. Okay. Okay, so this is I think the tricky bit that you were just somebody was just referring to. I had put in here that the board will develop bylaws, which I think is the wrong language, that determine who shall be noticed and given opportunity to be heard at the hearing, the procedures for the hearings, and the criteria upon which applications will be considered. This seems to be sort of the guts of the big things that need to be decided. I don't have the expertise to know who decides that and when. Alana put in here that the mayor decides that through regs. So I defer to others on that.
Well, to be clear, the mayor issues regs, that's under her authority. Whether we want to get into that much detail in the bylaws, at the last meeting, we had kind of determined that they would be done in regs because it's easier to flush out and you get kind of public comment and weighing in on how some of the hearings should go. But if I think if we wanted to, it would take more time to do that all right now in bylaws. It's not necessarily required that the mayor does it, but it's my recommendation that it should be done through regs.
Okay, and then I agree completely that bylaws is the wrong term, that this doesn't go in the bylaws. I'm just trying to understand who decides them and when, right? Because I think the board can't really do any substance until some of these decisions have been made, right? What needs to be in an application? What are the materials that we're going to require in order to consider somebody's clemency petition? What's going to happen at the hearings, all of those things. So again, I put in a little bit of a placeholder. I really defer to others on who makes these decisions and how.
These would
Well,
be.
I don't think we can punt this to the mayor on her own without us making a suggestion. I think we've got to write all of this ourselves. And if the mayor's the one who issues them, then issues regs, then she should issue them. She'll have an opportunity through her representatives here to weigh in on them, but I don't think we can allow somebody else in the mayor's world to do this.
I sort of agree with that this should be decided by the board. That I don't think they have to be separate bylaws. I think that they can be embedded within here, sort of standards of review and criteria for consideration. I think that can be a separate section within these draft bylaws. I had one other point as I was rereading it, is a hearing on number 1. It appears that the way that it's written is that a hearing is only when all of those things happen simultaneously. And do we want or instead?
That's a good point.
Is it really that a hearing is all these things have to happen at a hearing? Because they're closed. If a petition is being reviewed, it's closed. But there may be like information gathered, but not witnesses.
Yeah, that makes sense, Katja.
Good catch.
Does this fix it? I just put in an or hearing as a board session at which petitions are reviewed, information is gathered, or applicants, victims, or other witnesses are offered the opportunity to testify.
Yes.
Okay.
Just to clarify, I think petition should maybe be changed to application. I think they're the same thing, but just have consistent wording.
But back to the board will develop bylaws. These are bylaws that we're doing today. So is it a subset of these that we would be developing in the future? Is that what this is calling for?
And I could change the word to procedures. Yeah, I think the big question is, does it go in here or does it go somewhere else? If it goes somewhere else, what is that document called and when and how are we going to do that?
Why would it go somewhere else? Can it just be a section of this document?
So at the last meeting, we had discussed that these types of like procedures and what should be in the application and how people should be noticed should go into the regs, just because it would be a process or a description that needs to be flushed out more, that needs to have more detail and description, and that could be achieved in regs versus spending another 3 months developing this in the bylaws when the board needs to get up and running and adopt bylaws and elect a chair and start working on the next project. These types of duties or obligations would take longer to flush out in bylaws. That's why we had kind of decided to have them in regs. I think to Andy's point that the board shall I think they can if they want to have another like operating procedure. But if they want to make recommendations to the mayor for the regulations and what to change, or make recommendations for when they're in development, I think that could go in there, so that it's not just the mayor's office doing it by itself.
Yeah, I'm sorry that we had some issues with the appointment, and so I'm sorry that we're here kind of having missed those other meetings that occurred. It does seem like it would be like if kind of efficiency is the issue. It would be fairly efficient to draft 3 or 4 additional paragraphs that could go into this document and then make it operational immediately, because we're talking about procedures for the way that evidence is considered and how decisions are made and how witnesses are notified, right? Are those the sort of the main areas?
Yeah, it seems to me there's a bunch of big buckets, and we talked about them last time, Katya. I'll try to remember what they are. I mean, to me, some of the big ones are, what do we require of people to apply, right? Like, what are the things we're asking people to submit? Then what are the standards for consideration of that application, both in terms of like, does a hearing have to happen? What happens at the hearing? Who needs to be noticed and heard? And then sort of what is the standard of review, and what are the sort of principles that guide our decision making as a board? So I think those are sort of as I think of it, the 3 buckets of things that need to be decided.
And all those, this is Felicia, all those sound like kind of administrative procedures. And usually those things, I agree with Alana, kind of flushed out in regs. Those are the things that are usually flushed out in regs.
Yeah, because with administrative procedures as well, they need to be subject to public comment. So, if they're done in the bylaws, if they're done here, then they're not subject to public comment.
So let me ask this. Is it a thing that could happen is if let's say that we go through and we're successful, we decide to put those aside and have them be done in regs. We finish this task of going through the bylaws without that stuff, and then we go to the next order of business that one affirms the bylaws, 2/3 vote, and then elect a chairperson. The chairperson could then decide that one of the first tasks of the committee is to prepare draft regs for the mayor's consideration. Is that a path?
Sounds like a path forward to me. Sounds like a reasonable path. This is Felicia.
Okay, so what does that mean here? Maybe it doesn't go in hearings, because the other thing we need to talk about is what's left out of here is the issue about what needs to be in an application. So maybe we take this out and put at the beginning somewhere that the board will recommend I don't know what the word is, the board will recommend
We'll
procedures
draft
to the mayor's office
Right.
to be put in regulations that cover the following topics, something like that.
Yep, sounds good. Can I just ask, Alana, in your experience, how long does it take from the time that regs are proposed until they can actually be established?
That it varies wildly. It really depends. You would issue proposed regulations that are open to the public for comment for, I believe, at least 30 days. And then if you get comments in, then that kind of determines how long. Then the agency has to review the comments, consider the comments, and determine whether or not they need to implement the comments, and then they would put out another proposed regulation that is open to comment again, and then whether or not they receive comments on those, and then they can issue final. But it really depends on how many comments, I believe, and how quickly the agency moves. Oh, and you can also do emergency regulations. So then those would be immediate, and they would not be open to public comment. But what the agency has to do is draft emergency and propose. So the proposed would still be open to the public, but the emergency would be in place right away.
So by doing the emergency, we could actually act as a board under the emergency regs until such time as the full regulations are vetted as in the process you just outlined?
Correct.
Okay, so this doesn't hurt us from starting to actually do the work here yet.
And Patrick, this is Charles Allen. I think that's correct that the emergency regs allow us to move more quickly to get things established. I would say on my own experience, the more collaborative effort that goes into shaping those regs, if they're going out on emergency, just helps make sure that it's a smooth process. There's always some wordsmithing and some changes that take place during the regular feedback period, but we would not want to be in a position where we have the mayor puts forward emergency regs and then immediately people are criticizing. So the more work we do on the front end to get, the kind of common and shared language will be important in that process.
Thank you. That's right. I agree.
So this language probably is not very elegant because I was just trying to do it on the fly. We might want to just look at it later. And it seems to me, I just put a note to myself to move it to the beginning of the document where the more general things are. But essentially that will make recommendations to the mayor's office for regulations in the following areas: application requirements and procedures, requirements for who shall be noticed and given an opportunity to be heard regarding an application, the procedures for hearings, and the criteria upon which applications will be considered. Does that cover it? Have I gotten any of that wrong?
I would just note that it's the executive office of the mayor.
Thank you. Okay.
And then I had put at the beginning that I was going to just reformat everything once the substance is kind of done. So then I can move that to the beginning of the document.
Great. Thank you, Alana. Okay, this was language that already was in here and I just moved it, except that I put in this additional language and any other person the board determined should be noticed of a hearing. I guess that should be changed to any other person who is required. What we want to get in here is whatever the regulations require is what should be in here. So any other person who shall be noticed or who is required to be noticed. pursuant to the regulations?
Well, I think that language is there to determine whether certain, I guess, victims should be noticed.
Yep.
It could be pursuant to the regulations, but maybe there's somebody else in the community that has knowledge, or maybe like a character witness, or their employer or their probation officer or something. So I don't know if that's going to. I guess I could just go with friends too. They're not written yet.
Yeah, this is about like how soon in advance somebody has to be noticed, right? And so there might be other people who appear at the hearing, but it seems to me, I could be wrong about this, that the people who are required to get notice in advance as the applicant and their representative, and anybody else who's required to be noticed, which is probably just the victim, but there could be others.
Is this something that needs to be put in the bylaws? This is Felisa.
Good question. This was in the bylaws originally. All I had added was this language about other people. I had not considered whether or not this needs to be in here at all. What folks think?
I think we want to be careful about conflicting with the regulations also, since this is very specific as to timing. And I think timing is one of the things that would be one of the procedures that would then be in the regs.
Good point. Okay, should I just take the whole thing out?
Yep, I agree with that.
Okay. Okay, I took out quorum as I discussed because we put the definition of quorum at the beginning. I also think I moved this somewhere. I can double check. Decision on a recommendation
Can
shall
you
be
mute your
decided.
mic? Andy, can you mute your mic?
Okay, and then I think this is what we decided last time, that decisions on recommendation shall be decided by a simple majority. Oh, you know what? I think I took this from I think the legislative language requires that it be decided by a simple majority of the members voting present and voting. One thing that's not covered here, and maybe it need not be, I just was a bit confused by, I don't know whether or not the voting will happen immediately following a hearing, right? Because I can imagine a circumstance where we want to reflect upon what happened at the hearing, or that there might be some other time. And so I didn't know whether or not we should include in here, or again, maybe this goes in the regs, whether or not we require that a member needed to have been present for the hearing in order to vote, because they might be present at the vote, but not have been present at the hearing.
I think we talked about this. This is Felisa, where we decided, at least for a meeting, that voting, I guess, statutorily required. I guess members had to be appointed. Members had to be present at the meeting to vote. We didn't get into details about whether that. I think it was. I'm making an assumption. I'm going to take this. I'm going to make the assumption that it could be, you see, I don't know if I remember saying being by phone was okay. But you had to be present. It couldn't be by proxy or anything like that. It was that you had to be present to vote.
I think that's right.
I don't know about
yeah, I think we did decide that you have to be present to vote. And I think that I could be mistaken. I think that might even be in the legislation. But I can imagine a circumstance where a board member was not present at the hearing, but is present at a subsequent meeting in which we voted on that recommendation. Maybe we don't need to be that far in the weeds here, but I just didn't know whether or not we had strong feelings about whether or not a member needed to have been present at the hearing in order to vote whenever the vote happens.
Well, I think Felicia is right. I think we discussed that point last time and decided, or were leaning at least towards requiring that a member be present at the hearing in order to vote. That would be my view.
I would just like to also point out that considering that a lot of this will probably be done via WebEx, it can be recorded, and the member that may have missed the hearing could watch the recording and use that to come to a decision. But we did discuss last time that if they were not present, they would not vote, but that could be an option. So I was just going to put that out there for you all.
That's a great point, Alana. I'm sorry
Yeah,
for not
that's brilliant.
recalling that discussion last time.
That's brilliant, Alana.
Okay, so maybe just remain silent on the issue then. Just leave it as is. Decision on recommendation shall be decided by a simple majority of vote of the members present and voting.
Yep.
Okay. This is the term limit of the chairperson. I'm sorry that I don't recall if that number is in this legislation or if we need to decide it.
It's not in the legislation, just that the chairperson shall be selected by the board. So it doesn't say how long they're a chairperson.
I think 1 year's, we're not saying anything about whether it's renewable or not, but a term of 1 year would suffice typically.
Or, Sam, we can say chairperson shall be elected annually. To elect the same person or another one annually, we can do it like that.
Well, if you do annually, we would have to determine on what day. Would that be the end of the fiscal year, the anniversary date of the majority members being sworn in, or something else?
Well,
This is Charles. I think I heard Samuel and Patrick actually saying roughly the same thing, just with meaning 1 year terms and not limiting consecutive terms. Is that fair to say that's both of your recommendations, just using it slightly differently?
Yes, that states what I did.
now,
Okay.
whatever date we can decide on, we'll work that out. If you have any ideas what date would be the annual date, I'm open to that.
My recommendation would be, I think the way that Patrick say it, and Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard you say essentially serving a 1 year term, and that avoids locking in a date or an election date into the bylaws. But obviously, the group has to be able to conduct that, and therefore, as a matter of record and in the minutes, there would be a election date and a term set. So I think that might be at it. There might be some other ways to wordsmith it the right way, though.
Yeah, although I think as it's written right now, it gives us maximum flexibility so that if the chairperson is elected today, the annual is 365 days from today.
Correct. Okay.
Right, and if the chair has to leave before finishing her 1 year term, that way also covers that.
Okay, so I think what I hear people saying is that this language is fine as is and we don't need anything additional, that it can just say that they'll serve for a term of 1 year.
Yes.
This is Felisa. Sounds good to me.
Okay. Okay. Alana helpfully put in here, I had just put in meetings, and Alana changed this to meetings and hearings now that we've decided that hearings can happen, or now that it's clear that meetings and hearings can happen separately. So that's great. No changes here. Same here. We just did meetings and hearings. Oh, this is where I moved that language to about that folks can't disclose things they heard during confidential or closed portions of the meeting. Someone in a comment at some point had asked whether or not we needed to have people sign something to that effect. It struck me that it was fine just to put it in the bylaws, but I could add language that folks need to sign something if you think it's necessary. Okay, agendas and hearings here. This is the same change of the language that Alana added. This is the order of business, which we've already discussed. This stuff I just moved to all be up next to it when meetings and then hearings. And then that's it. I do think when we talked about meetings, there was a few sort of general things that that's at the beginning of meetings, that all of the agendas shall be prepared. And then I guess this is now just in the chairperson's requirement. So I had initially thought we needed to put this in meetings and hearings, but if we already have it in chairperson requirements, maybe we don't need it anyplace. Anyway, we can look afterwards and see just to make sure we're not be unnecessarily repetitive, or if we need to have it in more than one place. That's all I have. Other things folks want me to pull up on here?
It's Ilana, one other thing I just noticed. I'm not sure, I might have missed it, but I don't think the bylaws say anywhere that the Clemency Board is only considering applications of district offenders. That is something that was defined in the statute, so it should be pretty easy to incorporate in the appropriate place. I don't know if that's something we want here or in the
Yeah, I wonder if that should go. I'm just looking at these things at the beginning. So you think, Alana, we just need to put someplace in here to make clear that we're only considering applications for people who have been convicted of DC code offenses?
I think that would be
so
helpful.
it is in the Establishment Act, and it could be number 1 instead of what is under there. And I can read you what the establishment section basically says if you want to type it. Okay. There is established a clemency board within the EOM to review the applications of district offenders and determine which applicants to recommend to the President of the United States for clemency.
Alana, you have much more confidence in my typing skills than is warranted.
I noticed I kind of said that a little fast.
That's okay. There is established a clemency board within the EOM.
Okay. To review the applications of district offenders. And determine which applicants to recommend to the President of the United States for clemency. And then that would be it. The second part of that paragraph in the Establishment Act just says that OGC is to provide administrative support and staff and all that stuff, but I don't think that needs to be in there.
Okay, so I just realized this doesn't really, the structure of it just doesn't really fit the purposes and duties of the board shall include to, I'll change this to review the applications. That should work. Okay. Okay, there's probably some cleanup that needs to be done here, both in terms of formatting and just looking more closely at the language that I've added and stuff, but okay. Let's see. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, Emily. I think maybe the next part is just to kind of determine if we all agree on the substance of the bylaws. I will fix the formatting and clean it all up. I won't change any words or anything unless it's a typo. And that's what I'll do. But it's up to the board to approve the bylaws.
So are you saying that we'll do that? We can approve them in concept today, and that you'll do the close I's and T's crossings, but that we'll approve them today? are members of the board ready to do that today?
I'd like to have just another time to view it as a closer final document before we approve.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to see the whole thing clean before voting.
Okay. If that's the case, are we able to continue with our agenda for the day with the new business, or do we stop here?
I'm not sure. Normally you
Patrick,
would
this is
have
Charles.
laws adopted. Oh, go
I
ahead,
have a quick
Councilmember.
question. Yeah, thanks. So is our new business selecting a chair?
Yep, selecting a chair and discuss setting up the board website.
All right. I think that if I'm following this correctly, but I welcome anybody else's feedback on this. As much as I want to select a chair, the statute doesn't define how we select a chair, but the bylaws do. So if we haven't approved the bylaws, I'm not sure if we can select the chair. As much as I would love for us to go and get that done. I don't know if other people agree with that interpretation or not, but that's the way that at least I think I read that. That doesn't necessarily preclude us, however, from maybe talking about the website or other elements. But I think that the selection of the chair seems to be fairly rooted in the bylaws rather than in the statute. But if somebody else has a different...
The selection of the chair language I got from the statute.
Okay. I thought that it, and again, maybe I'm confused then. I thought that the way in which we spelled out in the bylaws about how to select the chair. So, for example, the one-year term, is it a simple majority, members present, things like that. I thought we had outlined that within the bylaws, not within the statute. But perhaps,
Yeah, the term wasn't, but I guess my understanding is just that the board will select the chair. And that part is part of the statute. But if we want to wait until we have a final clean copy to make that decision and then to select the chair, that's up to the board.
I'm comfortable selecting a chair today if other folks are. I just want to make sure that we feel like we're solid ground in selecting that chair.
So, and Councilmember Allen, you raise a good point also, just you're flagging for me in the bylaws that the only place where we talk about a simple majority vote of the members present and voting, that language is specifically on a recommendation. Decision on a recommendation shall be decided by a simple majority of members present and voting. I think it makes me wonder whether or not we should fix that in the bylaws, that we have all decisions made that way as opposed to just the recommendations.
That's fine by me, I think, if we feel like that's a gap.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because I think otherwise, if I understand this correctly, we define quorum to be a simple majority of the statutorily required. And then we say on recommendations, it's a simple majority of those present and voting. So I'm trying to think through what that would mean. If we just put at the beginning, I guess, sorry, I'm getting myself a bit confused, but if we just put at the beginning of the document, I suppose we could say decisions by the board will be made by a simple majority of those present and voting. That would include recommendations necessarily, and then that also would include how we do things like choose a chair. Although I think the chair is selected among the appointed members, the mayoral appointed members. That comes from the legislation. It's not entirely clear to me whether or not everyone votes per the legislation. I suppose we could decide that if we just make it decisions by the board will be made by a simple majority of those present and voting. that would include the decision of who's the chair. I don't have any, I'm not trying to express any opinion on this. I'm just trying to work that through of how we make those decisions.
It was my understanding that everybody would vote, but just vote for a mayoral appointee. But that was my.
So, Emily, you want to craft that language to put in at the front of the bylaws, and that'll be part of the cleanup? And does everybody agree on this issue that the chair's comes from one of the 5 mayoral appointees, but the vote for the chair is a simple majority of all statutorily required?
Yeah, I'm working on that language.
That worked for me, Patrick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds good, Patrick.
I'm looking at the language now and of the statute, and it doesn't seem like there is, it just says the board shall select the chairperson from among its members. So why is there a limitation on?
It says that the board shall select a chairperson from among members appointed pursuant to subsection A1 of this section. So A1 includes 5 individuals appointed by the mayor pursuant to the Confirmation Act with the following qualifications: 1 member with a background in returning citizen issues, 1 mental health professional, 1 member with a background in victims' rights, 1 member of the District of Columbia bar in good standing with experience in criminal law, and 1 district resident community member. Those are the limitations.
Thank you.
So for clarity's sake, it has to be one of the 5 appointed. The chairperson has to be appointed from one of the voted from one of the 5 appointed members, but all the people, all the members of the board can vote on that. Is that what we're saying?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to put something in the bylaws that reflects that. But we have to go back to the issue that Charles raised, which was, what do we do today?
And again, I'm good to go if people are ready. I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page. So I'd love for us to be able to select chair today. So if we feel comfortable moving forward, 2 thumbs up.
This is Felisa. I think I'm good to go on voting today. Right now, we have a quorum.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's hearing everybody. We'll go ahead with the vote today then.
Is anyone not comfortable with that?
I'm fine with other people voting. I know I've said before, we're still kind of assessing USAO's participation, so I personally won't be voting, but I have no, will abstain today, but I have no thoughts on what everybody else does.
The question now is, do we have a candidate?
Yeah, that's a question. Well, let's just do this though. Before we move on to that, we're closing out the bylaws conversation. We're going to schedule at our next meeting that you will have a copy of the finalized bylaws as established today. Clean copy. We'll only make pen and paper changes next week and then, or next time, and vote on them. Our intention is to vote on them at the next meeting, right?
Say that, Patrick.
Basically, that the bylaws, as we've discussed today, will be cleaned. Everybody copy ahead of the meeting. We will make a determination whether that to vote on those at our next meeting.
Oh, correct.
Okay, great. All right, so that ends that. So now we can move on to new business. Alana, you want to handle this part?
Okay, does anyone nominate someone or nominate themselves to be chair?
I have a nomination. I nominate that Patrick be chair of the Clemency Board. He's done a wonderful job leading us thus far, so I don't think we should change the horse while we're in the middle of the stream.
I second that, Reverend. I was going to do the same thing. Thank you for your recommendation.
Are there any other
Well, can I
nominations?
move that? Can I move that nomination be closed on one said name? Did you hear me, Elena?
No, you were breaking up.
Can I? Oh, I would like to move that the nomination be closed on the name that has been submitted.
Well, I think we should hear from Patrick whether he's willing to stand before we impose this responsibility on him.
Yeah, I'm still smarting over here from, I think, being called a horse just a moment ago. So as soon as I get all my feelings about that, I think we'll be okay.
Forgive me. Forgive me.
I'd be honored to serve. I will say, I think this is a pretty significant role, and that the bylaws reflect that it is a one-year responsibility, I think would be fine. I see this as a hugely important task that we're all about, and restoring this function to the people of the District of Columbia, to me, is a significant thing. So yes, I'd be honored to serve.
Okay, all in favor?
Move that.
Yes, you did.
It's closed on Patrick's name, and
Yeah, I second.
Felisa, are you saying something?
Now, are we up for voting now? I hate Robert's Rules of Order. Are we up for voting?
Yes.
Well, Felisa Carter votes yes for Patrick. May he shepherd us. May the force be with us.
I believe it's unanimous. Oh, well, I guess everybody else needs to vote. So
Charles Allen here. I'll cast an enthusiastic yes vote.
And me too. It's Andy. I vote aye.
Emily Gunston, I also vote yes.
I vote yes.
Okay, then it is unanimous. Everyone voted yes. Congratulations.
I think. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. No, so like I said, this is a really important thing for the city, for the district, for our citizens. Appreciate that, and your confidence. It's much appreciated, and I hope will be well deserved. Okay, so the next item of new business is discussing the setting up a board website. And I would assume that much of what would go on the board website is what will also be done with the group that does the proposed regs. Like, it's the proposed regs that will end up really determining a lot of the content of the website, I would assume.
Well, so OGC is kind of charged with administrative support. So we would be assisting with setting up the website, but since we've already had now 3 meetings, some of those meetings need to be posted on that website for the Open Meetings Act. So we need to have the minutes. And then there needs to be other needs to be other information on there, like who the board members are, who the chair is, the purpose. And we are also setting up government emails for the board members. So then that contact information would be up as well. But if there were any other items that needed to be on the website that we could put up there, to send those suggestions to me. And oh, I just got an email that your emails have been created. So I will talk to you all offline. How timely. And if there are any anything that you want on there, to let me know. And with PDS, OAG, and Councilmember Allen's office, if you wanted a certain person to represent your office on the contact portion of the website, to let me know in case that is not you. That's my spiel.
So this is the place where we'll also publish. Here's what here's the procedures we follow. All that sort of stuff will also get published on this website. Kind of maybe not in such a legal way, but as more of an informational, consumer-oriented way.
Yeah, I believe the bylaws will be public and posted there, and then there's usually a link to the regulations for the board or commission or agency. So they will link it to the DC Regs website.
And this would be the place where we would also publish our hearing and meeting schedules, things like that would also go up here.
Yes.
One-stop shopping for anybody who is interested in our activity.
Yes.
Okay, so you asked people to send you recommendations. The ones that you just mentioned, kind of the big ones about, getting the posting the meetings that have already been held and minutes of those, and the board chair, you'll start to put that stuff together. But it seems to me like a huge part of the content of this is getting the proposed recommended regs written, and I think that should be something that we address probably at our next meeting very, very directly. Get that stuff underway. Alana, with the bylaws, you came up with a draft of that. Is that something that's possible to be done as well as starting to draft proposed regs? Do we need help doing that, or how does the board want to proceed with that?
Well, let me know how the board wants to proceed. I could start some draft regs and kind of put it in the correct format. But I would like to get like recommendations, like what we want in there other than the administrative portions that we discussed today, because I assume that there's probably more, but I can definitely do that if you guys want me to.
Yeah, I think it would be great if you would at least get a start on that. And then I would like that there be some wider discussion among the entire board about that as well too, so that when you talk about the nature of the application, what sort of background information we want, how we're going to manage witnesses, all those things. I think those are really important things for us to determine relatively quickly and with some consensus. So do we want to do that? Do we have the ability to do that through a small working group? How is this done efficiently elsewhere?
That I'm unsure of. I review a lot of regs. I don't work with the agency to write them, but I think that a committee or subcommittee, or however it should be phrased, should be formed in order to get a lot of those ideas together to review and to have a substantive conversation about it.
I also wonder, this is Emily, I know that there are some folks in the community with a lot of expertise on this. And I suspect that there may be folks in the legal community in DC who may be willing to help us with these regulations.
Yes, I believe CCE, they had offered for Howard University Clinic law students to bring in some suggestions. They're working on criminal justice work, and they're advised by Professor Ross, who's a member of the community that's on this call now. And I assume that there will be other advocacy groups that have opinions and that want to provide assistance or thoughts to what should be in the regulations.
Okay, other board members have comments? So if I'm just trying to work this through while we speak, if we decide to establish a committee to draft recommended regs that will include members of the board and members of the community, is that something that everybody would be supportive of?
It would just be members of the board, and they can take recommendations from the community, but the community would not be on the committee.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Does that sound good to folks? So of course, I'd be looking for somebody for board members who are willing to volunteer to be part of that effort.
This is Felisa. I would volunteer to be on the committee with the regs, I guess, reporting back to the group about, about how we would implement these regulations.
This is Katya Smirnova. I would also be, would volunteer for that.
Thank you, Katya. Who else?
This is Emily. I'm happy to help as well.
Okay. Anybody else on the board? Okay, so that, and I would be happy to join as well. So that's at least 4 of us. Councilmember Allen, I also know there's a wealth of experience in your office who might be able to be advisors to this committee.
We'd be happy to. As you probably know, Jamie, who is my lead staffer on this, has just recently moved to Chicago. And so we miss her greatly, but Sonia is stepping right in and doing a great job. And so we'll make ourselves available to help out.
That's awesome. Great. Yeah, we do miss Jamie. She's terrific. Okay, so for members of this, I would love for us to, so Alana, advise me, can we meet before the bylaws are effective? Like, could this group meet next week if we could all find time to do it? There's nothing preventing that, right?
No, I don't think so. I guess it's formed informally. No, I don't think there's anything preventing it. I just would note that committee meetings do not have to be publicly noticed. So I think that they can be met more frequently, and it does not have to be open to the public.
Okay, good.
Just the final vote on it has to be open to the public and the whole board.
We're right. The vote would come before the board.
Yeah, but meeting in between just to talk about it, that could be done. Not offline, but closed, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So for Felisa, Katya, and Emily, I'll be looking to get something on the calendar next week, if at all possible, to at least get this started. And at the same time, at that first meeting, if you thought that there were others who could be advisors to the group, I'd love to hear about who they are as well. Okay. Is there any other new business that we need to address right away? New business, new business? Okay. I did want to note that I wanted there to be a moment for public participation in the meeting as well. I do see that we have some members of the public here, and I wanted to allow time for them to make any statements they would like to before we close. So is there any member of the public who would like to speak?
This is Josephine Ross from Howard. Thank you for letting us sit in. I appreciate it, and giving me the link. I was just writing into the chat over to you, Patrick Canavan, about whether or not we could have a representative from our law school clinic at the next meeting that you're thinking about the regulations. I just think that would be good synergy. We were hoping that we would be ahead of the game and could give you what we've drafted and so forth, but you are all moving very quickly, which I appreciate. But then it might be useful if we had somebody at that informal meeting that you're planning.
You just heard Professor Ross. We can appoint advisors to help us, so I'd be more than happy to welcome you there. Thank you. Appreciate the offer. Any other members of the public who would like to make any comments? Anybody? Okay. Do we have to follow Robert's rules, right? Motion to adjourn, or how does that work? Do we want to establish our next meeting date?
Yeah, we've got to pick the next meeting date. And I have a question for Alana. Alana, we need to give 3 weeks notice for a meeting, right?
2 weeks.
Just 2 weeks? Okay. Could we know, is it possible to notice more than one meeting so that we can make the meetings a week after each other if we've noticed them 3 weeks before?
That's possible, yes.
Okay, that's something I throw out to the group that maybe we might want to consider, particularly in these early stages as we're struggling to get started, that we might want to notice our next 2 meetings and make the second one just a week after the first one.
So looking 2 weeks today would be Friday the 2nd. That would be 2 weeks from today for the next meeting. Well, do you have enough time? Is that 14 days if it's 2 weeks from today?
No, I believe we would have had to submit it yesterday.
Okay. So the earliest we could do it, if we stick with the Friday schedule, Friday at 1 o'clock would be Friday the 9th.
Yes.
So can we go ahead and agree that we'll meet on Friday the 9th at 1 o'clock? And then, Andy, you said the following week have a second meeting.
This is Felisa. Andy, can I ask you, why do you would you like a meeting right after, 1 week after another?
Just so we can get going more quickly. Maybe when we settle in, every 3 weeks will be fine, but we're still struggling to get started. So the thought just occurred to me, we might want to a couple of weeks in a row.
Right now it's on the table for the 9th and for the 16th. Is anybody opposed to that? Hearing none. All right, and get those in the register for the 9th and the 16th. Okay, now do we need a motion? Anything else we have to do before we?
So move that we close the meeting.
Second? Is there a second?
I second it. This is Felisa.
Thank you. All those in favor? Okay, opposed? Hearing none, we're done. Thank you all.
Okay, bye. Emily, thank you for your hard work on bylaws.
Have a
You're
good
welcome,
weekend.
and thank you, Alana, for your help as well.
Yeah, appreciate it. Very, very good.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Alana.